So far, we've looked at this distinction between control and connection and how that plays out in the way we think about progress in terms of the changes that we're trying to make in society. And I've argued that at least for the past 250 years, from the Industrial Revolution onwards, we have looked at change in society predominantly in terms of control, predominantly in terms of what we can dominate and which we can beat in order to improve our social lives, our social problems. So we see problems everywhere and we quickly try and implement solutions. And we might not realize, if we're too focused on those things, if control narrows our understanding too much, we might not realize that perhaps those problems were created by previous solutions, that our new solutions might create even greater problems in the long run, and that we miss the underlying causes of our social ills. So how can we begin to bring in more of this connection mindset, this connection mode and perspective into our social lives, into our political discourse? So we all know, for example, that at the moment, whether we're on the left or the right, there is so little discussion between both sides. One side thinks the other side's stupid, the other side thinks they're selfish or ignorant or naive, the other side thinks they're privileged or out of touch, and we don't get anywhere, and it becomes about who we can kind of get one over, or who we can smash with our arguments, or who we can cancel or block. And we know that this is not a great state of affairs. We know this is antithetical to the ethos of democracy, of having a kind of collective ethos of civil friendship that makes society peaceful and can create a better society in the long run. But what do we do about it? And what do we do about each of those issues where we know there's some underlying social causes, like poverty and inequality causing crime or ill health, or infinite material economic growth causing climate change? But what do we do about those things? How can we bring greater understanding at the same time as actively, urgently trying to fix them? And I think, again, mirroring the post-happiness series, there are a few things we can do that bring connection back into our social lives. So the first is to simply prioritize the kind of social activities that more naturally cultivate this sense of connection, of openness, of coming together to have a greater understanding of what matters. So, for example, public spaces, in particular local spaces where people can come together. Doesn't matter what political preferences they have, it doesn't matter what class they belong to, but they simply, by sharing the same space, they can sort of mix ideas and begin to understand each other in deeper ways. Likewise, public celebrations and ceremonies can have this similar effect. And we often, these days, kind of deprioritize these things as nice to have, maybe things that are entertaining or fun, but actually they serve this deeper civil purpose of bringing people together, of opening people's minds, getting out of their little identity boxes, which we so often live in these days, and encounter different points of view. There are also ways in which we can begin to adapt current policies, current decision-making mechanisms to bring connection in. So we might, for example, in education, we can still have this primary focus on exam results and making sure children reach various learning outcomes, but we can begin to explore within the curriculum ways in which just small opportunities where teachers can enable children, pupils, to be curious, to explore various things either through individual or group learning that doesn't necessarily have an outcome in the end, like the ability to answer various exam questions. We can do the same in other areas of policy simply by asking people what the policy affects. So when it comes to regenerating deprived neighbourhoods or neighbourhoods where there are high levels of crime, we can still adopt the same controlling policies of policing and various other measures, but we can also ask people. We can begin to ask people, what do you want? What do you think the issues are in your neighbourhood? What can we do to make things better in the long run? The same in health. Doctors can continue prescribing various therapies or treatments or whatever at the same time as having a more holistic view of their patients. Well, tell me, what are your goals in life? What do you care about? How can having that conversation to really understand the whole person, and maybe having more integration between silos where health workers can interact with social workers, which can interact with people in housing, and so on. So these are things that we can begin to do. We can begin to adopt our practices to bring in connection. We can do this in a decision-making level as well. We can have occasional citizen assemblies or various other forms of deliberative democracy for some decisions we're making. We can have representatives for future generations on our decision-making boards. We can give legal rights not just to humans but to various parts of the environment that we think are important. These are all ways in which we can just open up to different ways of seeing things, pay attention to things that we don't know that might be crucially important. So that's a start, and in the next video we're going to go one step further.